those developments coming out of Mumia's Sugar? Well, to some not so good news for civil servants, well, there will be no review of basic salary structures, allowances and benefits paid in the public sector in the financial year 2021, 2022 to 2023. KTN's Noah Kipemboy joins us now to give us more details on just why this is the case.
Well, good afternoon to you, Abi. As Kenyans were expectant on matters third, remuneration review cycle from the Salaries and Remunerations Commission. Some people are looking forward, maybe if they're in part of the public sector, for their basic salaries to change and whatnot. This is something that happens after 4 years. So this third cycle, there's been a little bit of change. You understand over the past 1 year, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has not left any sector spared, and even the public sector included, since it has affected government. Right now, I'm joined by the SRC chair, Lynn Mengich, to help us put into perspective what exactly does this mean, and moving forward, what are the implications to the changes in this cycle that did not meet maybe public expectations. So thank you very much for joining us. So the third cycle for remunerations review for the public sector, what goes into that?
When we look at the review every 4-year cycle, the first thing is it is actually set in the SRC Act that every 4 years we shall undertake a review of remuneration and benefits in the public sector. But there is also a provision for continuous review of specific items. But every 4 years we take a holistic review. What does that entail? One is we carry out a job evaluation to assess the relative worth of jobs in the public sector. Over a 4-year period, it is expected that there will be changes that have occurred within the organization, and that could be a result of organizational structure design, could be just new jobs that have come up, and therefore we take a holistic review. But throughout the year, we still carry out job evaluation. So that's one thing that it entails. It's a holistic review of job evaluation. The second thing that we do is to carry out labor market studies. In other words, the salary market studies. And this is comparing pay, total pay, basic salary, and all other allowances in the public sector itself. And then we also carry out studies with the private sector. And for the private sector studies, there are two. One is looking at the state officers, and their labor market study is a comparison with the global benchmarks. So we pick benchmarks globally and assess the state officer pay based on that. Then we also carry out local market studies, and that is in Kenya. And the whole objective of these labor market studies is just to assess where is the pay of the public sector within the public sector itself and compared to the public sector. And the objective of that is a constitutional principle to ensure that the public sector is able to attract and retain the requisite skills.
The review for the fiscal year 2021-2022 and the following fiscal year has been put on hold. Reason behind that?
So based on those principles that I've mentioned, we did carry out a review and estimated that if we were to carry out a full review, it would cost 82 billion to address the issues that I mentioned earlier in terms of harmonization and equity and all the others. However, one of the principles which I mentioned is very key is one of affordability and fiscal sustainability. So in discussion with the National Treasury, and taking into account the context that we operate as a country, globally, locally, the first thing is, where are we? Because any pay increases can only happen in the context of the economy. If you end up with a wage bill that is growing faster than economic growth, it obviously impacts the country. And therefore, the context we are operating is both global and local. The global context is about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the economy. We are all aware that it has negatively impacted on the global economy. It has also impacted equally on the local economy. It has slowed down economic growth in Kenya. Kenya is not alone. In terms of impact on wages, specifically, one is based on ILO estimates, 8.8% of workers have either lost their jobs or they have had to do with shorter working hours. So what we see globally is a situation where people have lost jobs or they are working shorter working hours. In the Kenyan context, it's exactly the same. We do know that a number of industries have had to close, a number of institutions have closed. In some cases, employees have had to do with wage cuts or on long-term leave. So that context then says, where then are we as a country in terms of reviewing the wage bill? One, can we afford? Two, what is the context telling us? And the public sector is part and parcel of the economy in the country today that is being affected adversely by COVID-19. So taking into account that context, and we also looked at what are other countries doing in terms of wage bill, or rather basic salaries and all this in the context of COVID-19. And what we found out is several countries have taken decisions, to cut salaries, basic salaries. They have frozen any increases of basic salaries or pension increases, and have decided that there will be a freeze generally in wages going down. So taking that context into account and the fact that the economy is slowed down by COVID-19, and the real central issue here is the PFM Act, for a very good reason, set 35% as the upper limit on wages, on how much we can spend on wages as a percentage of revenue, in order to release money for development and for service delivery. Right now, with the COVID-19, the country requires money to invest in priority areas to help the recovery journey. So releasing that money means that we cannot afford to spend more money on the wage bill, because we will just be eating more onto the revenue.
Looking at the ratios initially, as you said, not more than 35% going to wages from ordinary revenues. Looking at our average over the past 5-6 years, we've been playing around 50, 51, if we do very well, 48, going back to 51. I mean, in this particular situation that we are in, since you're suspending this review for the next 2 financial years, will this have an impact on that particular ratio of wage bill to ordinary revenue?
Yes, it will. If we achieve the revenue target that is been set in the budget, and we retain the wages at the current level, we will be back to 48%. Now, you've also asked a very good question that we are around 50-something to 48. We've not really shown a trajectory towards 35%. And it is true that that still remains a very, very big challenge in this country. And the challenge is twofold. On one hand, as a growing economy, we will have to spend more money on essential services. We've got a growing population. So to deliver essential services, specifically education and health, it means that you will have to spend more money to recruit, compared to the ratios that is required in terms of teacher to student ratio or the health worker to the population ratio. We're not where we should be. So statistics tell us, as a growing nation with a growing population, we will still have to spend more resources to recruit in order to deliver services. So that is one challenge, and it's something that you can justify. On the other hand, we are also seeing a lot of recruitment in the areas that we should not be pushing. And I'll tell you, for example, in the current job evaluation exercise, we have come across very many new jobs, and these are not in education or health. We've come up with thousands of new jobs that are largely driven by organizational structures that is pushing a career progression within jobs. For example, in the state corporations alone, we have identified close to 30,000 new jobs. How do you explain that? They are not in essential services. This is not education, this is health. But there is a push to create new jobs even in the areas that we ought not to have. And that still remains a very big challenge. And we call upon our employing entities to seriously reflect on the need for Kenyans to have more resources released for development, and even particularly now to release resources to be able to drive the strategic agenda to recover in this country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the chair for SRC, and just recapping and saying that this particular review and the impact that we are foreseeing, the 84 billion shillings that was to go in this review channeled towards different sectors since we are in a pandemic environment, and that is the latest in regards to remuneration review in the public sector. Over to you, Abi.
Well, not some good news there for civil servants in the